All right, let's take one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this rainy Tuesday here from the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Center. A couple of different accidents to report. I-20 westbound at 126, that is, or I-26 with the right lane blocked. Quirley Mill at 378, Hardscrabble Road and Elders Pond Road, Monticello and I-20, and then Percival at Small Road Road. Today, scattered showers throughout the day with a high of 81. Scattered thunderstorms continue tomorrow with a high of 79, and then isolated thunderstorms on Friday as well with a high of 82. That's traffic and weather on your ride in on the early game from the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Center. I'm Tyler Head. Nine o'clock on your Tuesday. It's not Tuesday. Look at me, making a mistake once again. It is Wednesday morning.
It's okay.
Welcome into the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jalen Tart hanging out once again. Filling in for Jack Veltri 2 hours today. It's a little bit of a longer show as we're hanging out here on this rainy Wednesday morning. Heard me just give the forecast. A lot of rain over the course of the next 3 days. I think it's supposed to be out of here by the weekend, but it's not a fun drive in when it's raining.
It looked like Bowser was coming to Columbia when I was leaving.
So I get on I-20 at exit 58 out there at Augusta Road, and typically I'll run into some slowdowns as I get closer to like the merge there with 26, but like as soon as I got on after the little loop there, immediately comes to a stop. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be a long drive in.
Yeah, I stay on Northeast Columbia, Clemson Road, and Killian Road, going all the way back to Killian Elementary is just bonkers. It takes about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, depending upon where you live.
Well, and you learned yesterday it's different driving at 9 a.m. as opposed to 10 a.m.
Yeah, I think me with, reporting for, news previously, going in, we have our meetings at 9:30. I usually try to beat that traffic. I try to get in at around 8. So between 7 and 9 o'clock is when that traffic is going to be heavy.
Between 8 and 9 is when people are getting to school.
Yep.
That's when the majority of people are getting to work, working 9 to 5s. And it's crazy the difference. If I left because I usually leave about 7:40, 7:45. If I leave at 7:30, sometimes I miss everything. It's really that 10 to 15 minute difference that's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of just you leaving early, but there are going to be, with the rain, it was probably more traffic coming in, and a lot of people were being more cautious, so I didn't mind it. I'm here.
Yeah, so. Yeah. That's the important thing, and we got plenty to get to over the course of the next couple of hours here, but it is 9 o'clock, and we do have to kick things off each and every morning at 9 a.m. with our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. We got to start things off. Last night, Gamecock baseball in action, taking on the Ospreys of North Florida. It was able to emerge victorious, and here's how it sounded in the 10th inning.
Inning running, second base, the 3-2. In the air is center field. Racing back is Modal. It's up over his head and at the wall. Ground rule double out of the park. Carry on will come home to score. It's a walk-off winner for South Carolina. KJ Scobie is tonight's hero.
And freshman KJ Scobie getting that walk-off ground rule double in the bottom of the 10th to help South Carolina pick up the 3-2 victory. I didn't even realize this until Maneri was talking about it after the game. That's their first proper walk-off of the entire season. They run ruled one of the midweek teams a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was Upstate with I think it was Gaskin.
I think it was Upstate.
Yeah, I think it was Gaskin that had the walk-off to make it a 10-run game, but that's the first time they've legitimately walked off like, hey, we're tied, and this is giving us the win at that moment, which was, I guess, not surprising considering the fact of how many games they've lost this year. But, I don't know. It's fun when those kind of things happen.
And it was kind of entertaining. I was listening to it on the game yesterday, and not really sure who the commentators were, but they did a really good job calling the game. But it was very entertaining back and forth. For it to go to 10 innings, I mean, anybody can be beat. You can't take no opponent lightly. And I think for that to come from Scooby, who is a freshman, that's giving him some more confidence, hopefully, to go into the weekend to just build that more of a momentum for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, and look, South Carolina has absolutely zero margin for error, and we focus so much on what they need to do against conference opponents, but you also can't trip up in the midweek either because, and again, that was about a 500 North Florida team last night, and Carolina's done a really good job of handling their business against midweek opponents. It's the SEC teams that have tripped them up, but yeah, narrowly avoiding a loss last night that would have further hurt their resume. And look, I say this, that I'm not holding out hope that South Carolina is going to be able to go on a miracle run in these next 3 to 4 weeks and win enough conference games to get themselves in the postseason. But you do have to present that they're not dead yet. They could still technically win enough games to put themselves in the postseason tournament. I don't expect it to happen, but they're still alive. And again, winning against North Florida last night avoided something else that could have been a knock on your resume.
And then, like, with the rest of the schedule coming up, they're on the road at Kentucky, which I believe is winnable. And then next week they play Charleston Southern, and then next Friday they play the weekend series against Florida. Mm-hmm. That's pretty winnable games. And I think if you win those 3 series, you got good momentum going into May to start off May on a hot swings, so to speak.
Yeah, and again, you got 12 more conference games left, and realistically, Carolina needs to win about 9 of those. So you have to win every single series, and you're going to have to sweep at least one. And again, that's easier said than done. You have more manageable opponents because you got Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn, and then you take on LSU. Now, LSU, one of the most highly ranked teams in the country, that is going to be the toughest out of the bunch. And again, you got to get through all those other teams before you get to them anyway, but you have more manageable opponents until you get there. Not easy opponents, but more manageable as compared to what you maybe played in the first half of the conference slate.
So I'm new to this. So out of Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn, who is the best one out of those 3?
I mean, Auburn's the highest ranked. I'm looking at the D1 baseball rankings, which it's amazing what they've done to turn themselves around in just here. Yeah, they're number 11. Which
I think, like you said, I think if they get at least 2, that would be a good scenario. But I think one will put them in, give them some good momentum going to the LSU, because LSU is they're going to be good.
Well, it's not you have to win them.
You have to,
because again, you have to win 9 out of your last 12 here. And LSU, they're 12-6 overall. Auburn's 9-9, so they're 500, but still ranked number 11 in the country. Florida 6-12, and then Kentucky 8-10. But they've won 3 out of the last 4. They took 2 out of 3 against Tennessee last weekend, and they just throttled Louisville in their midweek game last night themselves, 17-5. So they're kind of on a kick of momentum right now. And again, I'm not sitting here holding my breath saying, well, I think South Carolina's going to be able to make the postseason, but you have to present it that they are not dead yet. They still have an opportunity.
And I kind of said that last week with Ole Miss. I think the Ole Miss game was very important, and for them to sweep a ranked opponent was pretty darn impressive in that fashion. So I think, I'm agreeing with you. I think they have the momentum going in to have a hot streak brewing within the next few weeks before the conference tournament.
And Ole Miss, who again was number 11 themselves, they were over 500 in conference play going into the weekend. They were 9-7 going into this past weekend, or 9-6 this past weekend, if I remember correctly. But you saw against Ole Miss basically the blueprint of what you need to do. You got to pitch well, because between Brandon Stone and Jake McCoy, they pitched 15 and a third innings between those 2 games. Did a very good job, limited the damage. Bullpen came in, did a really good job on Friday after Stone went the full 9 innings on Thursday. So there's your blueprint of what you need to do. Now, can you actually do that is going to be the question, and also have enough offense to supplement whatever's going on, when it comes to pitching. That's been the problem, is the inconsistency. Yeah, there have been games where South Carolina can score 11 runs, but they give up 12. And there have been games where they can do a good job limiting the other team's offense, but they can't score enough runs themselves. So being able to put together those entire games can be critical. And again, we saw them do it for one series, at least two of the games, before getting run ruled on Saturday. But can you do that for the next 4 series is the big question. And again, I don't think they can, but we can be surprised, I guess.
Yeah. It's hard to maintain that, and just to see, I'm just interested to see what adjustments Maneri is going to make going into these stretch of games before the conference play. Anything can really happen, but I'm not really too confident that Carolina can really hold this up. But I'm very interested I'm in for the ride for right now.
Yeah,
but it's really good.
And again, until they're completely dead in the water, and I don't know how many fans are still on board right now because, look, we've been talking about it as they've been losing conference series that people have been falling off steadily. And you look at the crowds at Founders Park, and they're not exactly packed to the gills because most people say, okay, well, the season's pretty much over. But, hey, if they go on the road and get swept by Kentucky this weekend, yeah, it's pretty much over at that point in time. But there's still people out there that are believing and hanging on, and credit to them for doing that because it's been a tough season.
I'm going to be a believer and call that they will get the win over Kentucky. Hopefully you're sweet. Hopefully.
Yeah. Hey, if they swept Kentucky, you'd be sitting in a pretty good position with 3 more conference series to go. So again, not hold my breath on that, but we'll see what happens. Again, want to get one more cut in here from Coach Maneri talking about, hey, again, walk off last night. They are exciting.
Obviously, it was exciting to have our first real walk-off win. We had one earlier this year to make it a 10-run game, but this was our first true walk-off win, and you forget how exciting those are when you've been away from the game and you have your first one. Just real happy for KJ. It was a beautiful swing he put on that ball, and had a lot of confidence in him. Gave him the green light, 3-0. Tried to do a little bit too much with that pitch, but then with 2 strikes, he just had a great approach and tried to go the other way, and worked out well for us. I thought we pitched great all night, and it was a good victory for us.
Yeah, and again, for the moment, if you're watching the game or out there last night, got to enjoy that, and again, hopefully it means something going forward to this weekend as well.
Yeah, and it's great action for fans during the week as well. It was a very entertaining game. I agree with Maneri. The pitching was really well. I just think now you just have to capitalize on good pitching to turn that into good offense and scoring more runs and have a balanced team and have strong momentum going into the end of the conference play.
Jackson Susie with the start last night, 5 full innings pitched, gave up 3 hits, no runs with 3 strikeouts. And Maneri did say after the game they're hoping he can help out on this weekend as well. Crowther came in for 3 innings. He's the one that did surrender one of those runs, and he had an unearned run come across the plate after an error in the field by Will Tippett. But overall, pretty solid performance once again for pitching that, again, is now 3 out of your last 4 games. Hopefully that stands for something going into the weekend as well. We'll get into football coming up next. After the Nico Shuffle, where does he fall on the Heisman odds list, and how has that helped Lenore Sellers? We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. It's our head and Jalen Tart filling in for Jack Beltry today on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra point. Tyler Head, Jalen Tart hanging out, filling in for Jack Beltry. Today, as he's out of town for the rest of the week. I didn't even ask. We don't have a throwback hip-hop or R&B T-shirt on today?
No, not today.
Not today. It's raining. It's okay.
Yeah, I had to do a little Nike today.
That's okay. Is that an old school Nike, though?
No.
No? I can't. Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
A lot of people have, I think one person told me that this looked real throwback. I was like, I don't think it is, but I like it. I like long sleeves. So
it does. It has a throwback
feel
vibe to it.
Yeah.
So it could pass as something a little bit older. That's cool.
Yeah. I thought about it today. I was like, no, it's raining. I didn't want to.
Yeah, it's understandable. I went out the door this morning and realized that it was raining and I didn't have a jacket. And I was like, because like I go outside to my car, but I pull in the parking deck here. So I will not be outside exposed to the elements until later when I'm going back into my apartment. So I'm like, I can risk being outside for 30 seconds 2 times today. I think I'll be okay.
I love the rain. I love rain. I just like the vibe. Everybody said, I don't like getting wet. I don't want to be, it doesn't faze me. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Snow, I love snow.
See,
yes.
I like snow for all of about, 10 minutes. Then I'm like, all right, I'm good.
I love it. I just, but, yeah.
So we've been following the Nico Iamaleava saga for these past couple weeks.
Yep.
Again, he leaves Tennessee, wanted more money, also apparently had a problem with the offense, ends up at UCLA, he's making less money, and is in, I'd say, a less than advantageous situation just given the talent around him at UCLA, where he's going to have a tougher time succeeding compared to what he had at Tennessee. Well, there's going to be ripple effects from those kind of things happening, and one of those is his opportunity to potentially win the Heisman Trophy. So he went into the offseason, or spring ball, tied at 3rd overall at plus 1,100. And he is now plummeted to at plus 8,000 after his move to UCLA the other day. So, and again, it's very early in the process here, so these projections are going to shift around quite a bit, but I think it shows your standing and where the ceiling is for you in a season based on what these kind of odds are, even as early out as a time like spring, where could he be solid? Sure. But I don't think he's going to go there and be elite and suddenly put this UCLA team on his back and lead them to anything like a college football playoff bid or something.
I agree, because who is he throwing the ball to? I mean,
pretty much nobody. I mean, they lost most of their receiving core from a year ago. They've got a brand new offensive coordinator, first time ever calling plays. Like, you were in a much better situation in Tennessee.
I agree. And now that you're at UCLA, you're making less. You're not even in the $2.0 million range anymore.
No, you're making less than that, and also you're in California where the taxes are higher. So
yeah.
And look, let's not knock this. He's still making 7 figures, which is more than all of us are making. So there's that, but you're not making as much as you could have been if you decided to stay at Tennessee.
I just think that me personally, I don't think the odds going down. I kind of saw that coming. Because the best receiver that on UCLA's football team, they're averaging at least 350 yards out of the entire year last year. Mm-hmm. So it's a big, big dip. I mean, if you're not throwing the ball to anyone, your performance is not going to be able to shine as what we saw at Tennessee.
And I also wonder about this because, again, he has positioned himself basically as the biggest villain in college football this upcoming year, because outside of people in UCLA's fan base, and there may be some of them that are rooting against him, I think everybody wants to see this guy fail, right? Because he had the audacity to ask for more money than what he was worth without proven production a season ago at Tennessee. And I wonder, let's just say he goes out there and has a really, really good season at UCLA and based on his numbers should be in consideration for going to New York at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I wonder how potential voters, and look, there are voters all across the landscape of college, sports media that get to vote on this thing, would his way of getting to UCLA in the eyes of people potentially voting on this thing? Because I think it would.
I think it would too. The only way that it would not affect him is if he doesn't go into the draft until if he transfers again and goes to another school. Then that's a different. I mean,
it depends on how he ends up transferring to that school if that does end up happening.
Yeah.
And look, if Nico has a good enough season this year, he can take off the NFL because he'll be 3 years removed from high school because he was a redshirt freshman starting last year. But just kind of talking about this from, again, theoretically, if he had a good enough season to be worthy of maybe being in conversation for the Heisman Trophy, I think the negative headlines and connotations around him would prevent a lot of people from wanting to vote for him.
Yeah, but it is a matter of him diminishing his chances and people not voting for him to win the Heisman. I think he did ruin his chances because what he did, he showed his character about what he wanted and not him getting what he wants and him saying, "Okay, I'm out if you're not giving me what I want." But again, I personally bank on the situation where he does not have no one to throw to in terms of talent and what you need to do on the field. He doesn't have anyone to throw the ball to. So that's kind of like really diminishing his odds. The only way this can happen is if he does have breakout performances where he's throwing 300-plus yards a game, which I do not see that happening in the Big Ten.
Yeah, so again, his odds plummeting way down the list here. In turn, though, that does bump Lenore Sellers up a little bit. And again, we're sitting here in April, so there's a lot that's going to change between now and when the Heisman Trophy is handed out in the middle of December. But now South Carolina's quarterback, Lenore Sellers, is currently tied for the 5th overall best odds to win the Heisman Trophy, tied with Dante Moore of Oregon, DJ Lagway of Florida, and Drew Aller of Penn State. Of course, all those other quarterbacks at plus 1,600. And again, it's more about where you sit in college football when it comes to these odds and how highly thought of you are. And I don't think it's surprising to anybody here locally that Sellers is in the top 5 of those odds, given how he played, especially in the back half of last season.
There is no surprise here. I kind of expected this to happen after what he did versus Clemson. It looked Heisman-esque. It looked something that we have never seen before and what Carolina fans have never seen before. I mean, I just see him breaking out. Like I feel it. I feel the energy of him having a breakout season. I think we're gonna get it against Virginia Tech. He has better talent, both on offense and on defense. And I just think that it's surrounded for him to win. And I just can't wait to see it happen in front of my eyes.
Well, and I said this last year. If he would have put up the same type of numbers in the first half of the season that he put up in the second half, he would have been somebody at least in consideration. And again, it took him a while to really hit his stride, and obviously the offensive line being poor didn't help him out. But that Clemson moment, 3rd and Sellers, as I like to call it, that would have been like your Heisman level moment. And again, we're not putting the cart before the horse here, and he may still have a really great season and not get invited to New York, but it is cool to see, especially from the history of South Carolina quarterbacks. And I think we talked about this yesterday. You know, Rattler being, a 4th-round pick last year, was the highest ever drafted quarterback in South Carolina history. That shows you that not that they've had bad quarterback play, but they never had like elite quarterback play compared to some other programs in the conference. So to have your signal caller be in at least consideration before the season starts for an award like this, pretty neat.
It's pretty neat as well. I mean, we haven't had this type of energy since Jadeveon Clowney had his dominant performance with the hit against Michigan, and he came back the next season and dominated that as well. I mean, it's really good to see him in consideration for the highest award and to be battling against Cade Klubnik, who is also, doing really well and having a very, very good college career. I mean, that says something. Like I said yesterday, I really believe that we could get Lenoris and Cade in the final in like the top 3 finalists for the Heisman Trophy this year. That could potentially happen.
And that, again, a lot of football to be played between now and late November, but you could be talking about one of the premier quarterback showdowns on rivalry weekend if Cade Klubnik ends up having another really good year. And last year was obviously a significant step forward for him. In fact, he's second best overall odds behind Arch Manning and Garrett Nussmeier to win the Heisman Trophy.
See, Arch Manning, I don't see why he's that high. I mean, I get it
because it's his ceiling. If he is as good as people think he is, he'll be in consideration for it.
Yes.
Now again, he's got to go out there and actually prove it. But and having a last name that he has certainly helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, and people want him to be that good, right? Because it's a great story if he is.
Yeah, but you got to play and you got to win. I think that's the thing about it. I think you can have these moments, but if you're not winning, does that weigh in your favor of you winning?
Yep.
If that does come into play. Just wanted to add that in there.
By the way, shout out to our guy Ian on the live chat, who is a resident Clemson fan, and I think he appreciates any time we give a nod to somebody from the upstate that is performing well. And Cade Klubnik did have a really good season last year and is looked at as one of the better returning, quarterbacks in college football. And again, if both he and Sellers have great seasons, man, you could have College Game Day coming to town for the Clemson game and what could be a great quarterback showdown and a potential effect on the college football playoff as well, much like last year's game was.
I think so as well, and I think from what we saw last year, it's not the end. I think we're gonna get a theatrical moment if that were to happen, but they have to win games. That is the most important thing.
Speaking of the college football playoff, we have gotten the schedule and the kick times for this year's bowl games as a part of the CFP rotation. And finally, something has happened that I've been begging for a very, very long time with one of the most prestigious bowl games there is. I'll tell you about that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. It's our head and Jalen Tard along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
Everyone knows that AAA Heating and Air has the best HVAC replacement options in the Midlands with their guaranteed financing, no payments or interest for 12 months, and a 15-year parts and labor warranty. They're hard to beat when you need a new system. But did you know they also have great deals for repairs? That's right. If your system is broken and you're strapped for cash, AAA Heating and Air can help. They'll get your repairs done with payment options for up to 12 months and also no credit check required. That's right. So if you are the homeowner, all you need is a valid bank account. That's it. That's all you need. So don't wait. Call AAA Heating and Air today and get your comfort back on track. AAA Heating and Air, comfort you can trust.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Reminder, Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway rolls along to another game. $250 in the pot as South Carolina heads on the road to take on Kentucky this upcoming weekend. If you have not already registered, go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win. And if a Gamecock batter hits a Grand Slam, you could win all the money in the pot this upcoming weekend. Getting back to football here yesterday, we got the kickoff dates and times announced for this year's college football playoff quarters, semis, and national championship. As, again, we are in the second year of the 12-team playoff. 26, we could go to 14. Who knows? We're still waiting to see what that's going to look like. But this upcoming year is going to look the exact same as last year. And, Jalen, I know you've only been doing the show with me for a short period of time, but I've had a long-held belief that there is one game that needed to get off its high horse and get with the times like the rest of them. The Rose Bowl has traditionally kicked off on New Year's Day at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, 2 o'clock local out there on California, and people talk about the sunset and all those kind of things. The only thing that causes a problem for is the Sugar Bowl that follows it, especially when it is a college football playoff semifinal game. Now, this past year was a different story because you had the terrorist attack in New Orleans that moved the Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Notre Dame to January the 2nd, which they played, I think, at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, whatever that kick time was, to where it didn't have to run late on New Year's Day. But in every year since, here's the funny thing to me, we position, okay, they put it on the schedule like, oh, the Sugar Bowl is going to kick off at 8:45 Eastern Time. It doesn't kick off till like 9:10, 9:15. College football games take a minimum of 3 to 3.5 hours. I hate having to stay up until 1 a.m. to watch the Sugar Bowl every single year, especially in years where it's a playoff semifinal game. I've said the Rose Bowl needs to move its start time up to get with every other bowl game. I could care less about your 2 p.m. local time kickoff out there. And finally it's happened. This year's Rose Bowl game will kick off at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.
I'm guessing I'm guessing we're calling this the Tyler rant.
Listen, this is not the first time I've done this. I've held this belief for a long time that I get it. The Rose Bowl's the granddaddy of it all. It's special and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're a part of the college football playoff now. Every other bowl game has to kick off at a certain time. You're not that special compared to the other ones because you're all equal in what you mean for the playoff now. Get with the times, move your kickoff up an hour.
I like this move because that way the Sugar Bowl can end at least by 11:30.
Yeah,
people can go to bed.
And for the full, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next year with assuming we're going kind of the same way with the Rose Bowl potentially becoming a semifinal and having to be played on January 9th or 10th or whatever. But for this upcoming year, your quarterfinal games will be the Cotton Bowl, which will be on New Year's Eve at 7:30, which also good on them for getting the game started early so we're not having to stay up until midnight on New Year's Eve to watch that or it interfering with New Year's Eve stuff. January 1st, New Year's Day, you're going to have the Orange Bowl at noon as the first quarterfinal game, Rose Bowl at 4, and then the Sugar Bowl at 8 o'clock to wrap up the quarterfinals, and then it's going to be the VRBO Fiesta Bowl on Thursday, January the 8th as the semifinal number 1, and the Peach Bowl in Atlanta on Friday, January the 9th as the second semifinal.
And that's great times as well because all of the games will end by 11.
Yeah.
And,
that was a move that a couple of years ago when they finally moved the start time up of like the national championship, and really it started off with their the ABC primetime game.
Yep.
So that used to kick off at 8 o'clock, which really meant like 8:10, 8:15, and it would go very late on Saturday night. Saturday night is not as big of a deal because typically you have Sunday off anyway, but that also affected the national championship because we still play it on Monday, which I think is stupid, but the national championship game would kick off at 8:15 or 8:20. And again, college football games take about 3.5 hours, so you're staying up late having to watch that when you got to go to school or work or whatever the next day. They've corrected that, where now it kicks off at like 7:40-ish, so we get over at a decent time, and I'm glad to see that following suit with these other games as well.
So is there a way for the semifinals to be... See, having a game on a Thursday and Friday is kind of interesting because I'm thinking have the national championship on a Sunday. But what day are you going to have the semifinal?
The problem is now that college football is extended further into January, you have NFL playoffs on weekends now. So once you get past the first weekend in January, the NFL playoffs are on Saturdays and Sundays, and that is obviously a point of conflict
you can't do
when it comes to scheduling. So that's why the semifinals are on Thursday and Friday, which I didn't mind this past year. I thought it was kind of neat, and it kind of gave you something to look forward to, on those days when you didn't really have any other football taking place. The Monday National Championship is still a problem for me, and I wonder, with the NFL potentially expanding to 18 games in the near future, if there is an opportunity with their calendar shifting to have a Saturday in mid to late January where you could have your national championship game. And I don't like it. I understand why TV does it because you have more of a captive audience on Monday nights. But, man, football's a Saturday sport. College football is a Saturday sport. And it just feels so wrong to me. And we've been doing it for 20-plus years now, so it's nothing new that we decide the national champion on a Monday. That's just still weird to me.
I still find that odd to have it on a Monday instead of having it on a weekend. I think having it on a weekend to where you come in on Monday and be like, okay, we already have a national champion crowned.
Yeah, and I almost wonder, and here's the thing, too. Last year's first-round games, which were played the Friday and Saturday before Christmas, went head-to-head with the NFL. Because the NFL, for the longest time, has stayed out of college football's way on Saturdays, but as soon as the conference championships end, the NFL starts playing games on Saturdays because those Saturdays have now become open. And this past year was no different. So when the college football playoff played their first round games on that Saturday, guess what? They went head-to-head with, like, Chiefs and Ravens, and then was it Steelers and Texans, I think, or some combination of those four teams because they were the same teams that played on Christmas a couple days later. I know that Roger Goodell said coming away from that in the future they want to work with college football more to kind of come up with a scheduling agreement there so they're not going head-to-head. Because here's the thing. The NFL kills in ratings anyway. They don't need to go out there and crush college football. It benefits them more to allow college football to have a better spotlight because it's essentially the minor leagues, right? College football, with absolutely zero funding from the NFL, build superstars that go on to the league to become even bigger players. So I don't think the NFL should be getting in college football's way, especially when their biggest games are taking place. And I'm interested to see if this year the NFL is still going to have games on that Saturday for Christmas while college football playoff first-round games are happening.
I think we might not see it this year, but we could potentially see it for next year because they're in the process of making the NFL schedule now, right?
Well, I think the schedule release is it'll be after the draft. It's in a couple weeks.
Okay.
And there'll be an NFL Network special and stuff. It'll be like 3 hours, and we're going to watch it because we're sickos for football, obviously. But I almost wonder if just for that weekend, because you don't have to play Saturday games. Like, hey, let's let college football have its day with its first-round games and not get in its way.
I think Roger Goodell should meet with Charlie Baker to kind of discuss that going into the 2026-27 season. Because I don't know when the TV agreements end or whatnot to where you can have that meeting and schedule to kind of go along with what you're saying.
Well, and I understand why you say Charlie Baker because he leads the NCAA, but he doesn't really preside over the college football playoff. The college football playoff is his own entity, so it'd really be
just the committee.
It'd be Goodell meeting with the committee, which this also underlines how ridiculous it is that college football doesn't have a central authority figure that could go to the table and meet with somebody like Roger Goodell to hammer out these kind of things. And said he has to find out of a group of people who he needs to talk to in terms of, figuring these things out. Again, it's just more undermines the mess that college football is. But I would really hope that the NFL would be able to stay out of college football's way and not try and crush them in the ratings. Because, again, they have more than enough ratings themselves. Like, they don't need this extra day to make tens of millions of more dollars. They're doing fine.
Or, I mean, it's kind of weird. I think putting it on a Monday is good for now, but there has to be another day or another method of doing this. I just did a quick Google search. It's Mac Rhodes, who is the chair of the football playoff.
Okay, so maybe that's the person we talk to.
Probably the person he needs to.
I don't know.
Goodell needs to. Yeah.
Again, I'm happy the Rose Bowl is moving its kick time up because that doesn't keep us up until 1 a.m. on January 1st watching the Sugar Bowl. But there are still some things that could be corrected with this going forward that I'm crossing my fingers we get changed here in the near future.
I agree.
So we'll see what happens. We'll come back and wrap up hour number 1. Spencer Strider sustained a bit of an odd injury. We'll discuss if we've ever done something similar in our own lives. As a wrap up hour number 1, it is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jalen Tart, along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Sorry, Ed Jalen's Heart wrapping up hour number 1. Appreciate everybody watching us on the Game TV, powered by Integrated Media and sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. You can also listen to us wherever you go on the 107.5 Game app. Get it at your iTunes store or the Google Play Store and download it today. So the Atlanta Braves have had a bit of an up and down start to their season.
Yep.
One of the things everybody was looking forward to was Spencer Strider making his return, which he did the other day, and had a decent outing. But the other day, or 2 days ago now, he was going through catch before a game and ended up straining his hamstring, which has put him down the IL once again. And again, it's a hamstring injury. He'll be back for too long. It is a bummer that he had just come back and gotten back in the rotation. And again, had a decent outing against Toronto the other day, and now he's going to be out for another 2 weeks. But it's the way that he did it that has a lot of people confused. Like, just playing catch and you strain your hamstring, that's something that doesn't typically happen. It's like, okay, was he like leaping for the ball? Was he stretching out to try and get it? Like, how do you hurt your hamstring just tossing back and forth? That's something I don't think we've got a straight answer on.
I don't know how that could happen. I read the headline and I thought he was playing catch with his child.
No, this was and pitchers tossed throughout the week.
Yeah.
To keep themselves loose and all that kind of stuff, and that's essentially what he was doing, and ends up hurting his hamstring in the process.
I mean, unless somebody threw the ball up in the air and he missed it and had to put some extra effort to try to get it, and it just happened. But if you're doing it casually, I don't see how you would mess up your hamstring like that. I don't.
So it begs the question to me: have you ever injured yourself in an odd or peculiar way at any point in your life? Something that either was just a bizarre or something that shouldn't have hurt, based on what you were doing, should not have led to you hurting yourself?
No, not that I remember. No. You?
I think back to when I got a Wii when I was 11 or 12. And, the Wii is very interactive, and you have to essentially move with whatever sport you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing the Wii boxing, and I legitimately, popped my shoulder, not completely out of place, but, just kind of messed it up for a second when you're throwing a punch.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess I should have stretched before playing the Wii, but I remember, popping my shoulder pretty bad playing the Wii and throwing punches at whatever the dude you're boxing against is.
Yeah, I tend to, be very careful with what I do. I've never really broken anything in my body before.
Okay.
So that's
You've never broken a bone?
No. I've never had a cast on any.
What's your worst injury that you've sustained?
I got in a car accident last year.
Okay.
And I had a burn on my forearm.
That's it?
That's it.
What burned you in the crash?
The airbag.
So it's like a carpet burn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's there until I'm no longer here, but I've never really popped anything or didn't know. I was the careful child growing up.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm a clumsy. I'm a little clumsy now.
Yeah, hey,
I have my moments, but I just don't. I don't like being in cast up, banged up, crutches. No.
I feel like you're either one or the other. You're the guy or kid that never breaks anything, or you're the one that's constantly injured. Look, didn't we all have that friend that was always has a cast on his arm, or he's got crutches, or he's got a knee brace on, or something to that degree, growing up, they were always just injured some kind of way?
Yeah, I had friends that, typically every other month they would come with a different cast or a crutches, or I don't know, but it was always that one guy or that one girl that would be hurt.
Or the guy on your football team that never dressed out and was always, in sweats on the sideline because, what's his injury this time?
Yeah, it was a year, I think, in high school where I was on the high school basketball team as a manager. It was one player that we had that was injured. And then every time the person would get back, he would get injured again. So I've dealt with that.
It's almost kind of like a ticking time. I'm okay, they're back for now. Let's see what happens, within the next week or so to put them back on the injured list.
Yeah, I just hope Strider comes back well. I know, like you said, they had an up and down season. The beginning of this season was kind of a rocky start, but as of lately, they're kind of trying to pick it back up to be the Braves of old. But hopefully, when Strider comes back, he can give them a boost going into the All-Star weekend.
Well, and when he's healthy, he is legitimately one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. And the Braves have started to turn a corner a little bit. Went on a little bit of a 4-game run with the win with the series sweep over the Twins. Beat the Cardinals in Game 1 the other night. Did lose last night. Kind of got away from them late there. But they started off 0-7. They're still clawing just to get back to 500. They're 5 games under right now at 9-14. And you hope it's like, okay, can by the end of May you get yourself to 500? And they're not far off, but you got a little ways to go before you get there.
Yeah, and I think it's a long season. Over 100 games, that's a lot of games to play, and they have a lot of time to turn it around and hopefully get on the winning streak here to give them momentum.
Speaking of baseball, we'll jump back into what happened last night for Gamecock baseball as they took on North Florida. Also talk some women's basketball as well as the transfer portal continues to evolve for Dawn Staley's crew. It is the Extra Point. It's our Ed and Jalen Tart along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. It's all right once again for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. If you're listening to me in the Midlands right now and you look outside your window, it's probably raining. And if you have an open crawl space under your home, a day like today can cause you a lot of issues like standing water underneath your home in that crawl space. That can invite things like mold, mildew, and pests like termites into your home that you absolutely do not want, because those kind of things can lead to things like wood rot and floor joist problems as well. And I've told you this before, about half the air that you breathe in your home comes from your crawl space, and you don't want to be breathing in air that's been affected by mold and mildew and those kind of things. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com, and they will send a professional out to your home to evaluate your foundation issues and crawl space problems and get them fixed right so you and your family can live without worry going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Hitt and Jalen Tart along with you for hour number 2 as we navigate you through this rainy Wednesday morning here on the game. Of course, we're moving away from spring football, so the only active sports going on with Carolina right now include baseball, and unfortunately it's not been the most fun season so far. And we had optimism going into the year, especially with the pedigree and resume that Coach Maneri had, that this team is going to be able to factor in to the SEC race. And unfortunately, that's not been the case. Now, yeah, they finally won their first conference series this past weekend against Ole Miss, which was great to see. But they're going to have to go out there and find a way to win roughly 9 out of the next 12 games against conference opponents to put themselves in any kind of position to make the NCAA tournament. But for last night, at least, they avoided a letdown by losing to a mid-major in North Florida by winning that game 3-2 in the bottom of the 10th. KJ Scobie's walk-off ground rule double. So at least for today, you give them their applause and say, good job, handled your business there. Now you move on to this weekend taking on another tough opponent in Kentucky.
Yeah, in the words of Don Staley, you got to keep the main thing the main thing. I think their pitching was the highlight of the night for Carolina, only allowing just 6 hits and only 1 walk. And it was very entertaining. Like I said in the first hour, very entertaining game from start to finish. You have Kentucky, you have Florida, and you have Auburn as your next SEC opponents. And get 2 out of those 3 in the series, you're back into the fold going into the conference tournament.
Yeah, you find a way to win the series this weekend against Kentucky, and if you sweep, that'd be even better. Then things get interesting because it's like, okay, now you've got a little run of momentum. We know Coach Maneri's teams historically at a place like LSU got better as the season went along. So are they finally clicking in gear? We don't know. Obviously, if you can pitch like you did this past weekend against Ole Miss in every series going forward, you're going to give yourself a chance. Now, that's a lot easier said than done. You mentioned last night 1 walk. That is something notable because this is a South Carolina team that has struggled mightily when it comes to giving teams free passes. And I get it. It was North Florida, so that's not the best team offensively you're going up against. But just allowing 1 walk to an opponent like that, again, hopefully it's a good sign for things to come, especially this upcoming weekend.
And that was, that all was started by Brendan Sweeney, striking out at the top of the 10th inning to get that momentum for them to get that win. So if Sweeney and Jackson Sushi pitch the way that they're pitching, that's a dynamic duo that teams in the conference need to watch out for.
Yeah, and Jackson Susie could factor into coming out and playing some stuff off the mat or playing out of the bullpen this upcoming weekend, as Coach Maneri alluded to last night. We'll continue on the baseball conversation, head out to the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Barry wants to weigh in on baseball attendance. Barry, appreciate your call as always. What's on your mind this morning?
How you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Hey, how you doing?
All right. Listen, actually last night they did leave 11 runners on base. I think that's still an issue. And when you're playing a mid-major and it takes you 10 innings to beat them, and then you celebrate like you just won the World Series, I don't get that. But here's my point about attendance. We talk about fans here. The fans are not along with this team, and it's living proof. Watch last night's game. There wasn't 1,000 people in the building. I pull up, the attendance says 6,600. Well, that's misinformation, okay? You've got 6,500 season tickets sold. So what you've got at Carolina, including all the games against Tennessee, never sold out. I've been there for regionals. I've seen 8,400 people in that stadium before, okay? So the 6,500 sold tickets, okay? I don't care if it's a Citadel. I don't care if it's North Florida or Tennessee. You're having 5,000 people that have tickets that are not coming to your baseball games. That has to speak volumes about the fans' interest in baseball right now. Now, like you said, they could go on a tear, but to me, it doesn't make sense. They got a turnstile that counts. Is somebody running through the turnstile 7,600 times? I mean, so basically what you're getting is 4,000 to 5,000 no-show season ticket holders, and I think that shows how much the fans are interested right now. I would like to get your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the call there, Barry. 803-404-6100. By the way, he's right. They did leave 11 runners on base last night. Tough went, let's see, 1 of 12 with runners in scoring position, left the bases loaded in the bottom of the 8th in a situation where they could have gotten the winning runs there instead of taking it in the 10th inning. Still found a way to win, which at the end of the day is the most important thing, but leaving runners on base has been a consistent issue with this team. As far as the attendance, and he's right, if you look at the box score from last night, they list the crowd at Founders Park as 6,727. There was not 6,727 people there. There might have been maybe 672 people there, but definitely not 6,000. And I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, he did say they have the turnstiles there, but I think they just go with tickets allotted for that game in terms of like claim tickets, sold tickets, however you want to phrase it, in terms of what the, I guess, anticipated attendance would be for the people that, if everybody with tickets shows up. But again, it's not the people that were in the stands last night. And he's right. That shows where a lot of people are at with this team. And just on the way we do this job here, we have a lot of interaction. We have phone calls, we have text messages, we have tweets, emails, all those kind of things. And I've seen in the past handful of weeks just the drop-off in people not wanting to even engage with us as much when it comes to talking about baseball, because they've said, oh, this team isn't worth anything and they're not going to amount to anything. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think they're going to be able to win enough games in the next 4 series to get themselves to the postseason. They still technically have a chance, so you're holding on to that small glimmer of hope, and there are still people like the ones in attendance last night still hoping that's going to end up being the case. But I'd say the vast majority of people have probably already checked out on this team because, again, they went through their first 5 conference series, not winning a single one. And when you don't do that, you're probably not going to end up being able to get yourself in the postseason if that continues.
And to Barry's point, I think your actions reflect on your performance, and the performance kind of resonated with fans to say they're not going to be able to have a great season of what we hoped for. Now, gotta give Maneri some slack. This is his first season.
But and I think here's why Barry brought up this point. When Maneri comes in here, and it was his first press conference talking about, hey, this isn't going to be a rebuild. We're coming in here. We're going to try and win right away. I'm going to try and get this team back to Omaha for the first time in over a decade. So there was a lot of hype and anticipation that they're going to be able to hit the ground running. Mm-hmm. And I've said this plenty of times. I think even Coach Maneri has been surprised at how tough the SEC is now. And again, he's been around this league forever, but he was gone for 3 years. And in that 3 years, a lot's changed in college baseball with NIL and the transfer portal and just the league in general. I don't think he was expecting it to be as hard as it was this year, and he's learning that reality the hard way. So does that mean that next year can be better because he kind of knows what to expect? Maybe. We'll see. But you had a fan base that now is looking at a guy that had plenty of times been to the place that you wanted to get to, which was Omaha, that had won a national championship, and I think a lot of people believed that, yeah, maybe you're not going to go out there and win the national championship this year, but you could make a deep run in the postseason because you had a guy that knew how to build a team like that. And when you come out and get your teeth kicked in for the first roughly 15 games of your conference slate, that's deflating. And again, I think even before you had the disaster against Texas A&M the other weekend, I think the majority of people are like, you know what, I'll try again next year, but this team isn't good enough.
I think, yeah, I know that, the SEC is tough, and you said he's been off for 3 years. That was 2022. So that's literally fresh off of people transitioning from COVID. And I think 3 years, having a 3-year break is too long if you want to be a coach. It's either you want to retire or be a coach. But to the performance point, I just think, yes, it is hard, and it's a gauntlet. NIL has changed a lot of what has happened, not just in, with football, but in all of college sports. And it's hard to adjust to that. But again, the attendant fans should care. I think Carolina baseball fans is like they're the most passionate fans you'll ever see when it comes to baseball. Knowing the history of them winning national championships and getting to Omaha, and that's something that we're accustomed to seeing. So for us to not see that, I mean, I would be upset too.
And the fans aren't wrong for having high standards because. Right. You're a fan base that shouldn't have to accept, hey, we're just happy to be here. Hey, we just love being out at the ballpark. no matter what happens. Like, no, you've been to the mountaintop. When Ray Tanner was here coaching, he took you to national championships. He won national championships. You were thought of as one of the best programs in the entire country. People were afraid to come to Founders Park to play. People saw South Carolina on their schedule and like, oh, man, we got them. That's going to be a tough series. That's not the case anymore. And Coach Maneri is attempting to rebuild that. And, again, I think he came in thinking that was going to be able to happen in year number one, and that's not been the case. Again, we'll see what happens in the next 4 weeks with the final slate of conference games. I don't expect them to win enough to turn the season around, but they could. That possibility still exists. I'm not putting my eggs in those baskets necessarily, but this offseason is going to be critical of saying, okay, Coach, what did you learn in your first year back in the SEC, and how can you now build a roster that you know can compete given what you went up against this year?
And to add, what players do you want, for them to step up their game so that they can perform at a higher level with the players you potentially bring in from the portal, the players you're recruiting? Because, you do have some great in-state signees that are coming.
Yeah.
So how are you going to mold those players together to build that winning program, off of what you're doing right now going into the end of the season?
And last night, you have KJ Scobie walking things off in the bottom of the 10th. You have young talent that should excite you going forward. And again, nobody came in here and became Ethan Petrie in year number one, but you've seen good production and moments out of Hollins. You've got good production out of Scobie at third base. Hitting needs to be a little bit better against the SEC, but still, Gavin Braylon behind the plate. You've got a lot of freshmen that show a lot of promise, that in addition to going out and finding guys in the transfer portal this offseason, you hopefully can build a roster capable of competing in the SEC next year, given the fact that hopefully Maneri knows what he's up against now.
I agree.
So we'll see what happens. Appreciate the call there, Barry. 803-404-6100. Real quick, we didn't get a chance to get to this yesterday, but of course, Gamecock women's basketball very active in the transfer portal. They're bringing Medina Okot from Mississippi State the other day, adding that big physical presence down low that they were lacking this year. And we talk about what one of the biggest differences from the championship team a year ago to this past year was Cardoso's presence. She was 6'7". Women like that don't grow on trees. You know what I mean? They're fewer and far between. So Okot giving you that size underneath the basket, hopefully can give South Carolina that dominant post presence like they've had in years past.
I'm not hoping. I'm believing, because please, whoever is listening to this, please look up Medina Okot's film. Phenomenal. When I tell you she runs the floor so well, she runs the floor. They call it the ostrich. And I love the name. I just love the name because she just glides up and down the floor. She's very balanced, can stretch the floor out and shoot her good mid-range shot, and she can rebound the basketball. Now, when I saw this, I'm thinking, who was going to be on the floor with her? We're going to have Tanaya Latson. We're going to have Raven.
Chloe Kitts.
And Ashley.
Four.
If you put Chloe, I personally think if you put Chloe at the 3 and make her a stretch 3 and put Ashley at the 4 and put Okot at the 5, that is a balanced monster lineup. But at the same time, too, you can also get Ashley to come off the bench because, she's coming off of an injury. But it just adds the depth of this team now is just more dangerous than ever. And they're not done. They're still not done. They could potentially get Gianna Neekins from Utah.
Yeah.
They could potentially get.
She's a lethal scorer.
She's a 3 levels. If you haven't.
Yeah.
My Lord. And Kylie Kitts, a lot of people are saying that she could still I'm at the point now, I don't know.
Yeah.
The longer this goes out, I don't know. But for them to get a veteran experienced SEC big who was 4th in the conference in rebounding, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's still room to add to what's already been an impressive transfer portal class, and we'll see what Dawn Staley does with that. NFL draft coming up tomorrow. Who's going to be the number 1 overall pick? I think it's pretty obvious. We'll dive into that coming up next. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Jalen Tart on your Wednesday here in the game.
No, we've come to a consensus. The entire organization is to stay at that pick, and I guess you'll find out Thursday night who we pick.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. That was the voice of Tennessee Titans general manager Mike Borgnosi, basically confirming that the Titans will not be trading the number 1 pick, and they will be there tomorrow night when the draft starts to make that first selection. I do think it's really funny when the draft starts every single year, and most years you can kind of figure out who the first overall pick's going to be, but that first team still takes up like 6 or 7 minutes on the clock before making the pick. It's like, come on.
I cannot stand that.
We already know what's going to happen. Don't even let Goodell leave the stage, right? He comes up there, says, hey, welcome to the draft. Everybody boos. And then he'll say, the Tennessee Titans are on the clock. And then immediately have somebody go hand him a card and say, with first pick, the Titans select Cam Ward, quarterback Miami.
For Mark to make that, like, to add some drama to really, like, no.
And it's a look. I think we have to remember the draft is a TV show, but everybody and their grandma knows who the number 1 pick's going to be.
Right. Like, we know Tennessee needs a quarterback.
Yes.
They're truth to tell the truth. Will Mayonnaise Levis, I'm saying this on record, Will Mayonnaise Levis is just not the quarterback that Tennessee Titans fans come to enjoy. And I think for them to upgrade and move on from Levis to go to Cam Ward, that's the most obvious choice. He led college football in total touchdowns, in 39 touchdowns, and over 4,000 passing yards, second in college football. That's pretty darn impressive, and this is a must-get for Tennessee. And they can easily build around him with his skill set.
And look, every single year, there's multiple teams, and there's no exception this year. You're going to have multiple teams selecting quarterbacks in the first round, trying to turn their organizations around. And a lot of times, especially if you're taking them with the first overall pick, you're expecting that quarterback to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to making your team better and hopefully turning into a franchise quarterback that leads your organization for the next 10, 12, 15 years, whatever it may be. I went back and looked, though, because here's the thing. Not everybody can be a Super Bowl winner, but at the very least, you hope your quarterback can get you to the playoffs, if not win some playoff games.
Now, with their roster, having Van Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, and hopefully Treyon Burks can come back healthy. That's not bad.
That is a B-level group of receivers, though. You're going to need more help than that.
Yes. The offensive line for the last 5-6 years has not been good. But their anchor, the core of their team is their defense. To me, it's their defense. That hasn't been good either. But they got to start with the quarterback. If they can get the quarterback and Van Jefferson and Ridley, hopefully Ridley can have a good year, they could be okay, but they're not contending with the Houston Texans in that division.
And look, Cam Ward is not perfect. He has his flaws, and I think he benefited from being the best athlete on the field a lot in college when it's time to watch, or really going back to an incarnate word, his time at Washington State, and then obviously ending up at Miami last year, because there were several times where he put the ball in harm's way a lot. He hangs on to the ball quite a bit. That led to that fumble against Georgia Tech where they lost that game that potentially kicked them out of making the college football playoff. But again, get at the NFL, get with an organization, and they can kind of fine-tune some of those things, and we'll see what he ends up being. But I was curious yesterday, and went back and looked, and I just wanted to do, since the year 2000, so the past 25 NFL drafts, the first quarterback off the board, whether it be the number 1 overall pick or somewhere later in the first round, there's always going to be somebody picked in the first round at quarterback. How successful were they with their respective organizations that drafted them? Out of the past 25 quarterbacks that were the first taken in their class, how many of them do you think actually got their teams to the postseason at some point with that same organization? There's 25 quarterbacks. How many of them you think were able to lead that team that drafted them to the playoffs?
Within the first...
Just in general. If at any point in their tenure with that team, they got them to the playoffs.
The one that I can remember, Trevor Lawrence. That's one.
Yeah. But I'm talking about from
since 25 years?
Since the year 2000, the first quarterback off the board every single year. Just take a wild guess at how many you think it's done it.
Number-wise?
Yes, out of 25.
12.
Close. 15.
Okay.
15 have gotten them to the postseason or been a part of teams that have made the postseason. 11 have actually won a playoff game.
Okay.
Which, like, out of 25, that's not terrible, but you also have to think about it from the context of, again, if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, you're expecting that guy to turn your franchise around. And for less than half of them to have even won a playoff game, I think it speaks volumes to how much of a crapshoot this can be. And again, sometimes it's your organization itself. God knows the Browns have gone through 10 billion quarterbacks, and the one common denominator on the failure of quarterbacks is the Browns themselves, as opposed to, a team like Cincinnati, a team like Atlanta, Carolina, Indianapolis, teams that have drafted really high and been able to have success and go deep in the playoffs with their respective quarterbacks. That can also say a lot about the organization as well. So based on the odds, Cam Ward has about a 50-50 chance of panning out as a good quarterback with the Titans. Now, again, I'm not saying he can't be a good quarterback in general, because he could flame out with the Titans, go somewhere else, and have success after that in a second contract. But in terms of leading the Titans to success, got about a 50-50 shot, it seems like.
And his coach is Brian Callahan, who was just recently hired. And he is a first-time head coach.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to work. Do you, being a first-time head coach, getting a rookie quarterback? Look, for example, look how Matt Eberflus and that situation panned out for him. I don't know, but for that division, the AFC that division is soft because you're only dealing with Indianapolis, Jacksonville, and Houston.
Yeah,
Houston has won the division 2 years in a row. If you can make it competitive in a two-team race, I can see it. And I think Cam Ward is the guy. I just think that they have to surround him with talent, one, to protect him, and for them to actually be a solid offense.
And that's an interesting point that you bring up, because Brian Callahan this past year was his first year as a head coach in the NFL. He did not draft Will Levis. Will Levis was drafted in 2023, was a part of Mike Vrabel's team. They obviously moved on from Vrabel and brought in Brian Callahan. So this is Callahan's first opportunity. And again, he's an offensive-minded head coach, the former OC with the Bengals. This first opportunity to get in the quarterback that he wants. And again, he seems to like Cam Ward. They're going to be taking a number 1 overall. Is that going to end up being a better fit than Will Levis was? Because that's the thing is, as a coach, you come in, you take over whatever you have, especially for a bad organization like the Titans, and you try and make it work. Will Levis clearly did not work. So does drafting a quarterback that Callahan actually wants put the Titans in a better position? We're going to have to see.
Yes, because at the end of the day, the offense is the one putting up the points. Now, it can't be the defense, but traditionally it's the offense.
Yeah.
You got to put up points in this league in order for you to win games.
Yeah, it's going to be important to see what happens. Again, it's pretty much a lot guarantee that Cam Ward's going to be number 1 overall, and we'll see how many minutes of that 10-minute clock they eat up to finally let Goodell come out on stage and
hopefully
announce the first pick.
3. Hopefully it's quick, get it over with, so we can get it to the Giants.
But here's after that, because Cleveland and New York, the Giants have talked about taking trade proposals. So, and I heard what the Bears GM Ryan Poles the other day said. This could be a really chaotic draft. So after you get past number 1, there's no telling what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I can't wait. Can't wait.
I'm excited for it to be here. I feel like we've been talking about the same 3 subjects between Cam Ward, Sherwood Sanders, and Travis Hunter for the past 4 months. I'm like, please, let the clock enroll and let's draft some guys, and then let's talk about what they're actually going to do on the teams that are on now.
Yes.
Because, again, it's been circles and circles and circles about the same things over and over again. I'm just ready to finally see these guys go somewhere.
Me too. I'm ready to see what team, who is going to draft, who is going where, and what storylines are going to come out of the teams where they get their draftees from. So I'm ready.
We'll certainly see what happens. Coming up next, talk with Jen Jensen, as we do each and every Wednesday. Talk a little bit of racing as NASCAR Cup Series returning this upcoming weekend, going to Talladega Superspeedway out in Alabama. That's coming up next. Is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jalen Tart along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Talk some racing here in just a moment, but it is time for our Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. Unfortunately, that team last night was the Atlanta Braves, falling 10-4 to St. Louis in game number 2 of their series. Bullpen ends up letting the Braves down yesterday as Inley De Los Santos and Nathan Wiles making his MLB debut combined to give up 6 runs over the final 2 innings to fall to St. Louis again 10-4. Braves dropped to 9-14 on the season as they are still trying to get themselves back to 500 after that rocky 0-7 start to begin the season as they'll wrap up the series taking on St. Louis coming up tonight out there in Atlanta, or excuse me, this afternoon in Atlanta. Getaway game coming up today at 12:15. It's time to talk some racing with Jen Jensen of the early game. A little bit of a lighter weekend on the racetrack this past weekend as the Cup Series was off for their one and only off weekend of the entire year. But Jen, it was so cool to see the trucks in the Xfinity Series back at the Rockingham Speedway, returning to the schedule. And, man, we had some really, really good crowds out there for 2 pretty entertaining races this weekend.
I was going to say we are not alone in the thoughts about the races being back to Rockingham, because the crowds were dynamic and totally sold out for Xfinity racing. And yeah, what a fun weekend overall. Everything, the crowds were into it. We had good racing, good passing. It was just overall, I think it's a complete win.
We did have another unique circumstance where you watch the race on Saturday. Jesse Love takes the checkered flag after a very spirited battle on some of those late restarts. Unfortunately for him, it turns out that his car was too low post-race, ends up having the win stripped. He drops to 37th place instead. And Sammy Smith, who's been at the front of controversy for the Xfinity Series this year after his aggressive driving at Martinsville, has a win kind of fall into his lap.
Yeah, and I hated to see that because really, Jesse Love, that was a really hard-fought and earned run.
That was
earned win.
Let me tell you something. I know a lot of people like to knock on drivers that get to where they are because they're funding, but being a paid driver does not mean you're not talented. And Jesse Love is pretty darn talented.
Oh, he absolutely is, and I feel wholeheartedly he will be in the Cup Series in not too long at all. And it was fantastic to see him get the win at that track. You know, where basically I don't even think he was born the last time they raced there.
No,
so,
he was not actually. That is true. I don't believe he actually was.
So it's like, you know, what just an amazing opportunity for him. So I mean, I hate that ended in controversy and stuff like that, but overall, I mean, he drove an incredible race, and we just got treated to such a show all weekend.
So Jesse Love was born in January of 2005. The last Cup Series race there was in February of 2004. So, yes, the track had been off the schedule by the time he was born.
Isn't that craziness? So what a cool opportunity to say, yeah, I wanted a track where nobody's raced since before I was born. Well, I sort of won it.
Yeah, then you have to give the trophy back, unfortunately.
Yeah, yep. But like I said, it was fantastic. You know, and I know it's already gotten people chattering about, well, can the Cup Series go and all that, and there's a lot to figure out with that respect, whether that would actually be able to happen.
Yeah, and look, there are standards that facilities need to have to get Cup Series dates, and I think you've seen in the past couple of years between North Wilkesboro, obviously Bowman Gray, the Gateway now hosts a Cup Series race. It's not impossible, and look, a lot of money has been funneled into a lot of tracks in North Carolina like those and like Rockingham to where they can get to that level. I don't think it's there quite yet, but based on the quality of racing, I do think hopefully the next-gen car would translate well to racing there. And by the way, I didn't know this until this weekend. It's now qualifies as a short track because they've remeasured it, and instead of being 1.017 miles, it's now 0.94. So technically it's under a mile and qualifies as a short track.
I did not know that either. Okay, that's actually very interesting. So that would be something fun. And, you know, is it something where it could be a non-points race? Is that something that, you know, might make it a little bit more appealing if they could shuffle some things around? Because obviously there's certain tracks where they're absolutely not going to take away a points race. And I don't know. Those of us who love that kind of racing, we'd love to see it happen. But like you said, it would take a lot for them to get there. But we can still hope and I mean, Texas lost some races, so
Yep.
so things can happen.
Yeah, and look, again, if you would have told me 10 years ago the Cup Series or NASCAR in general would be racing at The Rock, North Wilkesboro, and Bowman Gray, I would have thought you were crazy. But they've done a really good job of reviving some of these tracks. They mean a lot to people and obviously put on good racing as well.
Yep, 100%. So I think it was a well-done experiment, and I certainly hope even if Cup Series doesn't go there, I hope they will keep them, at least the Xfinity Series and the trucks. You know, I do hope that we keep them on that schedule.
Again, Talking Race when Jen says to do each and every Wednesday. Cup Series returning this weekend to take on Talladega Superspeedway and be on the road to the end of the season, 28 straight weeks to close out the season for the NASCAR Cup Series. And it's been kind of dominated by a handful of drivers so far this season. When you look at the standings, 5 drivers have won the first 9 races of the year so far. William Byron leading the overall point standings, followed by Denny Hamlin, who has his 2 wins, Christopher Bell with his 3 wins, and Kyle Larson with his 4 wins, all in the top 5. And we've seen this before where a small group of drivers will dominate an entire season. I think back to 2018 where Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. won everything with the exception of the championship won by Joey Logano. And it really kind of seems like right now we're on our way to that happening. The only exception being Josh Berry's win at Las Vegas, as he's sitting 17th in the points right now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting in how you see basically 3 teams dominating. You got Hendrick, and you have Joe Gibbs, and you have Wood Brothers, which I love having the Wood Brothers in there. I just think that that's such a great dynamic to get into the playoffs. So I think that's going to be fun to see how that all happens. But yeah, but who knows? It seems like there are some who come summertime, they've kind of getting their programs figured out, and we might start seeing more people winning. Chase Elliott, it seems like he never starts the season really, really strong. He kind of has to get his legs under him, and it seems like after about the Coca-Cola 600, he starts to do better. So getting into the next section of the season should be very educational for everybody.
And that is the interesting thing about this championship format. And look, there's a lot of things that change about it, but it is what it is for right now. You don't have to have a great overall season. All you got to do is find a way to win at least one race in the first 26 and then put together a strong performance in the final 10 races of the year final 10 races of the year in the playoffs, which is exactly what Logano did. Won on fuel mileage at Nashville and then was able to do enough in those final 10 races to end up winning the championship overall. And again, I don't love that, but that's where we're at as of right now. So even these guys dominating right now does not guarantee that they're going to be your Final Four or your champion's going to come from that group.
Nope, 100%. So nothing is given until that final race. Let's just be honest.
And again, coming up this weekend as they return, it'll be Talladega Superspeedway, which does open up the possibility of a wild card type of winner given the draft and Big Rex and all that kind of stuff. I do think it's interesting that after the Daytona 500, where once again Ryan Preece has a nasty flip on the back straightaway, NASCAR has not made any changes to the cars to try and keep them grounded a little bit more. So we could be in for another chaotic happening with a wreck this weekend as well.
Yeah, I sure hope that's not the case. But, this is one of those weekends that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. will actually have a chance to win. So he seems to only rise to the occasion on these types of tracks. So dig at him, I guess, on a Wednesday morning. But I'm looking forward to the racing. I always like Talladega. It looks like the weather should cooperate. So I think it's going to be a great weekend, and it'll be fun to see who we're talking about next week.
Well, as we get on later into the spring, we're inching ever closer to the important weekend that is Memorial Day. Of course, Coke 600 for NASCAR, as well as the Indy 500. And starting today, rookie orientation and the first practice laps for the Indy 500 tomorrow, the high boost session, where if you want to see speeds of 240-plus miles an hour, that's for you. I always love watching Indy 500 practice and qualifying because cars should not be going that fast, but, man, it's fun to watch them.
Oh, my gosh, it is so much fun, and obviously I'll be up there for the 500 itself. But, yeah, I totally keep an eye on all of this. It used to be where you had the month of May, and it was just the speed weeks that went on, and they've kind of abbreviated that a little bit. But, yeah, I'm going to be keeping an eye on today and tomorrow for sure. It's going to be so much fun to watch. Absolutely, and we'll talk about what happens at Talladega this weekend and start looking ahead to Texas this time next week. Appreciate it as always, Jen. Yeah, thanks so much, Tyler. She's Jen Jensen from the Early Game Talking Racing, as she does with me each and every Wednesday. We'll come back and wrap up the hour. Arena football is still alive. I know. I can't believe it either. We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
Welcome back in. Is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Jalen, have you ever come across something that maybe you enjoyed as a kid, like a game or a snack or something like that, and as an adult you're like, wow, they still make that? Or wow, that show's still on TV? I can't believe that. I thought surely they were discontinued or canceled it years and years ago. You ever seen any of those things?
I have. I'm trying to think what specifically. Jerry Springer.
Oh, yeah. that was on for a while.
So, before it got canceled, I was just turning. It was just, I think this was right before I graduated college.
Yep.
I was just turning the channel and I saw it on a station, on a TV station. I was like, wow, they're still doing episodes. And I was like, I just remember going to my grandma's house every other weekend, and I would get up in the morning and I'd turn on the TV in the basement. The first thing I see is Jerry Springer on the TV, and I'm like, wow, they're still making this. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I think like a few weeks later, it announced like they were canceling it. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So
and Springer passed away a couple years ago, if I remember correctly.
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So I was surprised yesterday to learn that arena football is still kicking. I don't know if you ever got into arena football over the years. It's always kind of been around. It's something I've always been aware of. I used to watch it as a kid. Growing up in Georgia, we had the Georgia Force. They had a couple of actual video games for arena football that were pretty neat that I played, but it's not something that I've actively paid attention to. And what caught my attention was Jeff Fisher is the commissioner now of what's known as Arena Football 1. Jeff Fisher, of course, Mr. 7-9 for his entire tenure in the NFL, had that one Titans team that took the Super Bowl and lost, but out of his 20 full-time seasons as a head coach, 10 of them he finished with within at least one game of 500. So again, earned that moniker of being Mr. 7-9. But he's now the commissioner of what's known as Arena Football 1, which is, from what I can gather, the third different version of the Arena Football League. And this one's barely hanging on by a thread, by the way. They have 8 surviving teams, originally scheduled for 12. 4 folded before the season began, and 2 folded after, or 6 teams are left. 4 folded after the season began, and 2 folded after just one game.
I don't know how you're going to last with 6 teams.
They're still doing it. They're still kicking, and I give them credit for that.
I just question, how long is their season?
It's been, I think it runs through May. They've been going since like February. But here's the thing. Have you ever heard the expression about, like, cockroaches are going to outlive us all because apparently they can survive, like, a nuclear apocalypse?
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that I think arena football is going to outlast every other major sport because they find a way to continue to stay alive through bankruptcy, through COVID, through everything. Somehow, arena football is still around. I don't know how. I give them credit. But, yeah, they're still surviving somehow.
Applauding to them for staying on the air all this time. And I think getting Jeff Fisher is interesting because he's been around the game for so long and could give the business side and, typical, professional, football mind to players and stuff. So this is good that they got him. I just interested to see, as a executive Jeff Fisher, what are you going to do?
So last year, arena football did garner some headlines when they played their Arena Bowl in a mall in New Jersey.
Oof.
I don't know if you saw the headlines from that, but this mall in New Jersey had a big open area in the middle. They played their crowning championship game in the middle of a shopping mall.
That sounds like an
indie promotion that just finds a way to continue existing.
The old Guerrilla Pro Wrestling with, God, I forgot the commentator's name from AEW.
Yeah.
Quickly. He was commentating there. It was something like that.
It's kind of like that. Like, they're just always around and always existing, through no matter what. Quickly, and I was curious yesterday, I ran through the history. So the original Arena Football League ran from 1987 to 2019. That was the original OG. The entire time. That ended. A new Arena Football League was founded in 2023, which had no connection to the old one. That folded after the 24 season. 5 of the 16 teams folded within the first 3 weeks of the season. Now this new Arena Football 1 has emerged, and as I mentioned a moment ago, they started with 8 teams. Originally we're going to have 12. 4 teams never made it to the season, and then 2 teams folded after just one game. But yet they're still kicking. And They don't have plans for their championship game as of right now, I don't think. But if they played in another shopping mall or, heck, maybe they play in a parking lot somewhere, it would not surprise me because that's just kind of where arena football seems to be right now.
And they're saying in the article by TMZ saying that they're interested in bringing in Hulk Hogan to help
that is another thing.
Promote it. I'm like, okay.
His Real American Beer has signed on as like one of their big sponsors. Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. Now, at what point does Hulk Hogan take credit for creating the entire thing? Because he's known as a habitual liar.
He takes no credit.
I think he will. I think
he probably would.
I think he will at some point.
I'm interested to see how that will play out.
Yeah. That would do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Jalen, appreciate you filling in for Jack these next couple days.
You're welcome.
Past days, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. 11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. Rainy morning. Still raining out there, Chris?
Little sprinkles.
Little sprinkles. I made the mistake of walking out the front door without a jacket this morning. And I was like, well, I'm only going to get rep for like 30 seconds going in my car. So I think I'll dry out. I'll be okay.
Yeah, I was walking around early this morning at our house, which is not downtown, but still. And I heard this noise. What is that? And I was like, oh, that's a massive amount of rain coming from the sky. Didn't expect that. Not one of those people that gets up and watches the Weather Channel every morning like Nick Saban.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I was surprised.
I just do a quick check of the weather app when I roll over in the morning, turn my alarm clock off. That's usually it. I'm like, okay, I'll go from here. Which it didn't say it was going to rain until later on this afternoon. So I was not incorrect for walking out the door without a jacket.
I wear the same thing, like, regardless of the weather. Like, I might add a jacket to the fold.
Yeah.
Might not. Sometimes I get myself in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, why do you have on shorts and a T-shirt? It's 40 degrees outside. Whoops. What? That's okay.
Yeah, it happens.
My mind's elsewhere.
Wes Mitchell joining us remotely today, not getting wet, staying nice and dry inside.
I planned that.
Oh, it's strategic?
Yeah.
Wes is only going to come in on days where it's not raining.
Well,
weather has to be ideal.
He's not going to be in for the next couple days. Then I'll go ahead and plan accordingly for that.
See, you've looked ahead.
Well,
I don't have
there is a weather checker.
So no. So Jen, in the mornings when we do the transition from the early game to my show, she writes down the traffic and weather for me to do as the last one. So she writes down, hey, thunderstorms tomorrow and Friday. So there you go. There's your weather
traffic
report for this week.
sometimes?
Oh, I do traffic all the time.
Oh, I've never heard that.
I do it every morning at least once.
Okay. Awesome.
Which
good to know.
Most of these accidents hopefully have cleared up by now.
Contact Tyler with all of your weather and traffic questions.
Hey, it's part of doing the job.
But let's talk a little Gamecocks, too.
Let's talk
probably
some
should.
Gamecocks. We should. We're transitioning away from, obviously, spring football coming to an end last week with the spring game. I want to kind of analyze different position groups now that we've seen, or at least read for the last month, of what these guys have been doing and the production that they've had. I think the easiest one to start off with is obviously quarterback. And we know, hey, Lenore Sellers, QB1. There's no debate about that. But after what we saw in the spring game, I think people are a lot more intrigued by the battle for quarterback number 2, because I think a lot of people would have thought naturally, okay, Aaron Nolan maybe leading the way there. But between Cutter Wood's performance on Friday night, Luke Doty obviously playing really, really well and having the experience, it's not as open and shut as maybe people thought it was going to be on who QB2 is going to be.
I don't think it is. I think that's a competition that is going to continue to progress. You know, now that, like, spring's over and you don't get the sense of, okay, this guy won the job. You know, you may have some idea in your mind of a front runner. The staff might have some idea in their mind of a front runner. I think the coaching staff likely thinks about it in this way. You've kind of got the, hey, we got a long ways to go. We've wrapped up spring. We got a break. You've got summer. You've got preseason camp, right? Those are two, like, the summer's going to be important. The preseason's going to be even more important because then you're back on the field. You're in full pads. The season is right around the corner. So you kind of are building in, and everything that Shane Beamers has said publicly has backed this up. That competition will continue. See how it evolves. See where it goes. You've got some young guys on this roster where they've got a chance to continue getting better. You've got an older guy on the roster in Luke Doty, who had a really good spring according to Beamer, and he can continue to get better as he has continued to reintegrate into the quarterback room. But you also kind of have some short-term thinking of, in the back of your mind of, all right, well, if the season started today, who would it be? You know, but that really doesn't matter as much right now because, of course, the season doesn't start. I think coming in to spring, there was probably this general thought from the public, oh, Aaron Nolan, you know, he's coming in, 4-star guy. He signed with Ohio State. He's a big-time quarterback recruit. He'll probably be the backup. They're probably bringing him in to be the backup. I think the reality is that they brought him in to compete for the backup job, but then you've got other factors here and that you've got other quarterbacks on the roster. And as we've spent some time since the spring game talking about, Luke Doty is one that I think really needs to be in that conversation more than he has been publicly so far.
Yeah, I think I was trying to go through in my head what are just the biggest, I don't know, developments from the spring that, you know, maybe weren't anticipated or were at least noteworthy from a big picture standpoint. And to me, one of the first things that came to mind was the development of Luke Doty, not only being in the QB room, but then apparently playing pretty well throughout the spring. And then I thought just quietly had a really nice night during the spring game as well. And, I wonder, when you're looking for a backup quarterback, is that even a little bit different of a skill set or a little bit different in terms of qualities at what you're looking for when you're just saying, hey, who's the best pure quarterback? Maybe so. I mean, to me, I want my backup to be a guy that has some experience. I want my backup to be a guy that knows their role and is very happy in that role and is willing to sort of be a backup and know that they may not play, but that they have to go into every single game anticipating that you may go from playing not at all. How many different positions in sports do you go from, hey, you're not playing at all? If things go as planned, you're not going to be on the field, to all of a sudden you are in the most important position on the field. And so being a veteran, being a guy with a certain mindset, a certain leadership, all that matters. I mean, that may be one of the biggest developments of the entire spring, is that Luke Doty is 100% in this battle for QB2. And, maybe even if you said right now, maybe would have an argument to be the favorite, I think. So it's certainly ongoing, but I think this thing is very, very real in terms of Doty being a factor in that QB room. Obviously, with everybody we're talking about being behind Lenora Sellers.
And I think it's interesting, too, because I think you would have to say he's probably the favorite to at least start the season in that backup role. And, again, we're talking about this with the hope that you don't have to break that glass and put him out there, that Sellers can stay healthy and all that kind of stuff. But as the season goes along and, hopefully you're having some games that you win handily where you can get Aaron Nolan and Cutter Woods and guys like that out there to get some on-the-field experience like Sellers had in his freshman year behind Spencer Rattler, how that might change as the season goes along. So, yeah, Doty might be your backup number 2 for the Virginia Tech game. By the time the Clemson game rolls around, is it, by that point, Aaron Nolan or Cutter Woods or somebody else, just given the fact they've had an entire full season to develop and progress and all those kind of things, and maybe even get into some games themselves? And, again, what the answer is at the beginning of the season may not be the same at the end of the season.
That is a good thought. It is, I think, a very good question, a fair question. But I do think if you kind of analyze this thing, what is but before Luke Doty moved back into that quarterback room, what was your quote-unquote problem? It was you didn't have something similar to a Robbie Ashford. You had a lot of young guys. Dante Reno played a few, just frankly, nothing against him, just like it is what it is, inconsequential snaps. And then Cutter Woods has never played or even been in a college football program until January. And then Aaron Nolan has not taken a snap. He redshirted at Ohio State. So you didn't have anybody with meaningful game experience, and a couple of the guys absolutely zero, game experience. Only one person who had even been in this program in Dante Reno. So now you got Doty in the mix. Well, game 1 against Virginia Tech, and then if you take it to the end of the season, the Clemson game, if Sellers is healthy, which everybody hopes he is, the only experience that like a Noland or hypothetically a Reno or hypothetically a Cutter Woods would have is just, maybe being inserted at the end of a game, or if a helmet comes off, or if there's a temporary injury, again, assuming health. That still means that if there's a game situation along the way, the staff is still, Mike Shula, Shane Beamer, they're still looking at it going, all right, we need to put somebody in. They're still going to know Luke Doty's the guy who has played the most college football and has the most experience at quarterback. I think that's going to weigh into the equation, really, not just game 1, but the entire year. Now, these other guys are certainly going to have a chance to progress throughout the year, but it's kind of different, right? Like taking it from the practice field to, okay, now you're playing LSU, You got to put somebody in on the road, at LSU. What are we going to do? For me, I think it's a luxury. It's very meaningful for this team to have Doty, and I think that's going to be the case throughout the year.
Yeah, I think Chris, with I like the word luxury. I mean, that's to me, not everybody has this right now in their QB room. Like a lot of teams are scrambling for QB1, and you have that not only locked in, but you potentially have a QB2 who is just a veteran. And yeah, Luke hasn't, I'm sure, played as much in his career as he wanted to, just in terms of if you go back and count up all the games or the snaps or the reps. But just, I mean, the guy has played quarterback at this level. He's played wide receiver at this level. He has obviously played some special teams at this level, and just has been in a position where he has been in front of those crowds, man. So if that's who you had to turn to in a major situation, that's, I think you actually feel pretty good about that. And I think here's the way I would qualify it. Can an Aaron Noland or even a Cutter Woods, let's not sell him short, even though he's a freshman. I think ideally you play Cutter in his 4 games or whatever, and you redshirt him. But can one of those guys step up and pass a Luke Doty and pass all, and just be that good that all these things we just talked about, all the qualities, all the experience we just talked about, that those things don't matter as much because, hey, this guy just looks that good. That to me is a really good situation to be in.
And I think as, these exit meetings for spring are going on, you'd have to always ask the question, because South Carolina currently has 4 scholarship quarterbacks. Do you still have those same 4 guys by the time the fall rolls around? And again, I don't expect Doty or Aaron Nolan or Cutter Woods to go anywhere, but what happens with Dante Reno? Is there a chance that maybe he explores going somewhere else if he doesn't see himself factoring into that QB2 role or finding his way onto the field anytime soon? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a question you do have to ask. Last year, they lost 2 guys in Colton Gauthier and Tanner Bailey when it came to hopping in the transfer portal, after the season had concluded. So you always have to ask that question of what if something like that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, there are, just for context, there are a couple more days left in this portal window up until Friday. So we're still seeing across the country, the rate has slowed down, I think is fair to say, but you're still seeing some other guys, that have jumped in the portal. So, Wes, I know you have the if not the exact numbers, the ballpark figures of kind of when and how many of these exit interviews have been taking place, but something that was expected to kind of wrap up this week. And frankly, some of those needed to happen to where a decision one way or another could be made. So where everybody knows where they stand, where the coaching staff knows where they stand. And frankly, after some of those meetings, some guys need an opportunity to kind of process things and do some thinking.
Yeah, I think there was about, maybe 50 or so over the course of Friday and then going into Monday this week, Chris. And then I think the number was maybe 20 for yesterday, and then the rest of the team. Beamer said Friday. I don't know if he truly meant Friday or if he just said the wrong date, like if he just meant the next day, which would be today, or there may be something on the schedule today. I don't know. But for the most part, as of yesterday, a good portion of the team has already had their exit interviews and already has an idea of where things are. And, from what I've heard, these are not like, let's make you feel great about yourself exit interviews. These are tough conversations about where you are. And for some guys, it may be great. Hey, you're going to be a starter, or you're in at least a position to maybe be. But for other guys, it may be a hard truth.
Again, that transfer portal open, the window open until the end of the week, and we'll see if anybody else decides to hop into that. We'll continue on with our position previews, jump over to the defense, look at the secondary coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on here on the game.
All right, our friends over at Integrated Media can help you out if you're having issues with your Wi-Fi at your home. If you ever had issues, know you're not alone. I've had problems. I know talking to Wes, he's had problems at his home. We've had the folks over at Integrated Media, Michael and Nathan, come out to our homes and help us get that situated. It's very important for us. Work from home. If you have a family, if you like to stream across multiple devices, you need to make sure that your Wi-Fi is running at tip-top shape. Let Integrated Media be your Wi-Fi experts. Come out and test your Wi-Fi during a free in-home consultation. Here's what they're going to do. They'll inspect your current hardware. They'll run speed tests at different locations inside, outside, all around your home. And they'll even advise you on your current service provider so that you're getting the best service, the best quality, and make sure that you're not overpaying. That's integratedmediainc.com, or give Michael, Nathan, and the great team at Integrated Media a call. 803-948-8327. That's Integrated Media.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Gamecock baseball picked up the victory last night over North Florida, 3-2 in 10 innings with KJ Scobie's walk-off in the bottom of the 10th. Back in action this weekend, taking on Kentucky on the road. First game starting on Friday night at 6:30. Pre-game coverage starting at 6:15 right here on the game. 4:30 on Saturday, and then 12:30 on Sundays. They look to stay alive in their hunt for the postseason. as we continue to look through Gamecock football position group by position group. We'll jump over to the defensive side of things now and look at one of the areas that I think out of all the position groups on this team maybe is the most secure, the one that I think everybody feels the best about, that being the secondary. You obviously have returners like DQ Smith and Jalen Kilgore at the safety spots. You have Judge Collier returning at one quarterback spot in the debate of, okay, is Cisse going to be the guy on the other side? Miles Norwood obviously had a good game in the spring game the other day. But I think that the big question becomes of, okay, who's going to occupy that nickel spot between Jalen Kilgore, who did it last year, done for the past couple of years, and Brandon Cisse, who shows the ability of being a cover corner and somebody that can do that as well. That's really kind of the big question mark that still lingers in that area of this team right now.
Well, when you look back at the beginning of spring, a couple things on the nickel safety part with Jalen Kilgore, who is kind of a, I think, important linchpin in all this to determine how the rest of it unfolds. Shane Beamer, when Wes and I sat down with him early in the year, was pretty adamant that they were keeping Jalen Kilgore at nickel, and where he thrived last year, as you said. And to enter the spring, to begin the spring, and everything we saw, to continue through the spring, he also played nickel. We know he can play safety, of course. Peyton Williams was a guy who, opposite DQ Smith, occupied, maybe not exclusively, with the first group, but he worked a lot with that first group, from my understanding. And then you got some other guys that have, been in the mix too, Kelvin Hunter, David Busey, et cetera. Now, is that a continued question into the summer, into the preseason, in a quest to find the best five? Do you at some point make an adjustment there? I mean, I think you keep that possibility on the table, but it really does seem, Wes, like they would like to keep Kilgore at nickel even as the spring progressed. I don't know if we heard anything different there, did we?
The only thing, and we're getting deep into the weeds in terms of reading into things.
Yeah.
And the only thing that caught my attention and piqued my interest just a little bit was when Clayton White was talking about Brandon Cisse, and he just randomly brought up the versatility that he brings to the defensive backfield. And, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think he mentioned something about, you can play obviously some bigger nickel backs, or you can go with a little bit more coverage type nickel backs. And it just kind of made me think, is there a chance we just see a little bit more maybe of a matchup approach, depending on opponent, depending on down distance, depending on score, game flow, all those things? Is that a possibility? I think when you have older players like South Carolina will have in those positions we're talking about, it does give you a little bit of freedom to mix and match and be comfortable with guys playing multiple spots. I mean, Kilgore is going to be on the field. Like, I think we all know that. The more you hear about Cisse, he's going to be on the field too, I kind of feel like. And so the question is, all right, is it who's the fifth guy on the field? And I think right now, you hear Beamer talk about, he was asked about Kelvin Hunter specifically there at safety, but he roped that into, and this was just on Monday, so post-spring, he roped that into, hey, we've got a lot of guys vying for that safety spot opposite of DQ Smith. Obviously, you'd give Peyton Williams the lead right there, I think. I don't think that's breaking any news, but to me, that's ultimately the question. Is it Peyton Williams, or does Kilgore slide back, then Cisse slides over to nickel, and then Norwood over Kari Swain, once he gets back, starts at that corner spot? It's all about getting the best five on the field. But, guys, Beamer had a lot of really positive things to say about Cisse, specifically in the post-spring game press conference.
Well, and let me add one more just kind of piece of evidence. You make of it what you will. And going back, and I thought I saw this, but I confirmed by reading Wes Mitchell's details from the South Carolina spring game piece on GamecockCentral.com, shameless plug. Kilgore was out, obviously, for the spring game. Jalewis Solomon, who played some corner last year, but also from a body type standpoint and skill set, he could play nickel too. Like, he could factor in there. The first two guys out there in the spring game were Zabari Sandy and then Jackson Berger, who's a walk-on. So Cisse was playing corner in the game. even with, a couple guys out who would normally factor in to some degree at nickel or start at nickel. So, that kind of caught my attention too. You've also got the fact that Vakari Swain was not with the team in the spring. We expect, I think it's fair to say, he will ultimately be back this season. So that's another guy that's been a corner and has played in, double-digit games during his career. I do get that, man, when you look at Cisse, to piggyback off your point, Wes, and what Shane Beamer said, like, you look at him down on the field, you're like, man, this guy looks the part, and he won the 2 awards that you could win, that he was eligible to win as far as, newcomer of the year on defense and on special teams. And they really, really like him. Football junkie, size, like versatility. But it did catch my attention that in the spring game he still played corner. Is that, just to get him reps there? I don't know. He seems to have spent more time there, but he has played some of both during the spring. So he does have that versatility to where once you have kind of your full complement of guys available, assuming everybody's healthy for the season, that's just another piece that you can factor into all this.
And getting back to safety, obviously it can't be understated how special Nicky Morey was, and he's likely going to hear his name getting called tomorrow night in the first round of the NFL draft. And similarly to like Kennard, you don't necessarily expect one person to come in there and replace that level of production, but can the combination of DQ Smith, Jalen Kilgore, Peyton Williams, whatever that combination of safeties look like, be able to all come together and play as a unit at that same type of level to where you still have a very feared secondary and safety spot like you had with Ebenori, especially this past season, Wes?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is it forces you to play a little bit more just sound football, I think, in terms of, we always talked about Nick from the moment he arrived was an eraser. Like if you had missed tackles up front or you got out of your run fits or made a mistake, this guy's going to run down a play and keep it from going the distance. And, how many tackles did Nick have as a freshman out there just cleaning stuff up? And so I think that puts a little bit of pressure on all those guys, in my opinion, not to go make the great play, not to like overextend and try to do too much. Nick was a guy, if you're a coach, you're probably okay with him maybe extending his assignment a little bit, maybe getting a little bit out over his skis a little bit, so to speak, because he's just such a freak athlete. You're okay because he's going to make a play. With the other guys, I think the important thing will be not overextending. Do your job, do your assignment. Hope that Dylan Stewart and those guys up front can continue to get some pressure for you and just go be who you are as a unit and playing together, as opposed to trying to be Nick Ebenori, because let's be honest, Nick ain't walking through that door.
Yeah, and again, he played such a huge role in this defense these past couple of years, and certainly going to be somebody that's missed, and looking forward to seeing where he lands in the NFL draft coming up tomorrow. We'll continue these position previews as we go through these next couple days here. Want to go back around to some of the stuff that Coach Beamer was talking about at the Welcome Home event the other day that Wes was at. Coming up next is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Rolls along, Tyler, Wes, and Chris on your Wednesday here on The Game.
All right, if you're a male looking to reclaim your vitality, you can reach out to our friends over at Game Day Men's Health. They help men reclaim their vitality by optimizing hormone levels, specializing in testosterone replacement therapy to boost your energy and strength. They're located conveniently in Northeast Columbia. Same-day appointments are available for fast and convenient care. If you want to find out more information, you can go to gamedaymenshealth.com/North-Columbia. That's where you can find out more. You can book a free test. They have awesome man cave style clinics that include TV and refreshments, again, conveniently located in Northeast Columbia near I-77 and Two Notch Road. Give the team over at Game Day Men's Health an opportunity to help you. 803-265-3161. Personalized treatment plans designed by licensed providers. Game Day Men's Health.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you on your Wednesday. Appreciate everybody checking us out on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. You can also listen to us on the 107.5 Game app. Get it from the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, and take us with you wherever you go. I want to loop back around to Coach Beamer speaking the other night at the Welcome Home event up in Florence. Some things we didn't get a chance to get to, including him talking about some of the leaders on this team, potentially being guys coming in out of the transfer portal. Here's what Coach Beamer had to say the other day.
Not right now, but I think it's coming because I was telling some of those guys the other day. I think Boaz Stanley on the offensive line has those qualities. I do, and I was telling Boaz, last year, and even when Spencer came in, it's kind of like you go through January, February, you're trying to get acclimated as a new guy. You go through spring practice, you're trying to figure out how practice works and how we do things. And then you have a little bit of a break in May, and then when you come back for summer school, you're more established and you can kind of take the bull by the horns. And I think that's what Spencer did in a lot of ways. I think that's what D. Knight and a lot of those guys did. But I think there's multiple guys that have those have those qualities, and we need them. You know, Nick Sharp on the offensive line, but I know he was banged up, but I think he's that kind of guy. Boaz certainly playing center. There's a natural leadership element to that position that's important. I'm trying to think, you know, new guys. I'm sure there's a lot of them, but those would be two, particularly on offense, that come to mind without a doubt. And you know, we got 3 transfers in Brady Hunt, he's married. Boaz, he's married. And Gabe, he's getting married in a couple weeks. So we got three guys on our team that are transfers that are married guys as well. But I do think there's something to that because they're older guys. They're not young freshmen anymore because of their lifestyle and the fact that they have a wife. There's kind of not a old man mentality, but if you're a young freshman out of high school, you're like, man, that dude is married. And there's kind of a natural leadership element that automatically comes with that, if you will, too.
And, you know, the question about leaders is always an important one, but I think in this year in particular, it becomes more interesting just given what you lost from last year. Because, again, last year was such a senior-laden team, especially on defense, and you had so many of those natural type of leaders that kind of led the way, whether it be, you know, a guy like Boogie or Tonka that have been around here for a while, D-Knight coming in and making an immediate impact and being kind of that leader. Debo Williams obviously have been around for a while, and replacing all that is obviously not easy. And again, I think you kind of turn towards some of those older guys, especially ones like you mentioned that have been married and those kind of things, or getting married and those kind of things, as just natural leaders in general, whether it be on the field or off the field. And again, it doesn't sound like it's materialized exactly yet, but it seems like they might be turning in the direction for some of those guys being the ones that other guys in the team are going to be turning to.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have had the wanted sign out for, you know, guys to step up as leaders. And I think the natural place you look is the guys that have the most playing experience, whether it's here or other places, or the most, you know, life experience. And that, you know, you had some of those guys coming in, like Luke Doty, right? Like, that's the guy. Nick Barrett's someone on defense that's been identified. But you also, I think, if you're the staff, you're hoping, knowing that, hey, we're bringing in a Boaz, and he's been around the game a while. He's married when you're recruiting him out of the portal. And you know him a little bit, but it's not like you've been recruiting Boaz Stanley for 2 years, right? Like you would somebody out of high school, 2-3 years. This is the portal. It's very abbreviated. It's very condensed. You don't have time to get to know guys as well. You have to make these very quick decisions and kind of see where guys' priorities are. But, you know, you think back to last year, and you brought up D-Knight, Tyler. He was a guy that, you know, it wasn't the beginning of January where they went, this guy's a leader. This guy's going to be one of our alphas. It took a little time, and I think they are starting to see more and more some of these older guys like Boaz stepping up into those leadership roles. But sometimes guys, when they're coming to a new team, even if they're older, like a Kyle Kennard, they want to come in, learn the ropes themselves, not be overly, you know, not rocking the boat, but eventually if they have those capabilities, they'll take that step forward. And that might be lead by example. That might be more vocal. I think from what we've seen of Boaz, Wes, he falls into kind of both, right? Lead by example. While it's not done, he seems to have the inside track to be the starting center this year. And from what we've heard and seen a little bit of, he is a very vocal guy too. So they need him to continue that, and they need to find some others as well.
Yeah, vocal guy. He's a smile on his face guy at all times. And, you know, I think that center position, and Beamer talked about it a little bit there, you need to have a little bit of a leadership quality there. It's not quite like the quarterback, but certainly there's a lot of just, I would say, communication that gets kind of just baked into that position. And it depends on the scheme a little bit too and how you approach things. But certainly a spot there where it helps to have somebody who, has a leadership presence. And, you know, I think South Carolina, funny enough, like they have had success going out and getting guys who are married, guys who have started their families, and guys that, you know, are getting married, and just there is kind of a, I don't know, like it started to become a trend. And I wonder, I don't know if there's causation or if it's just correlation, but those people typically have been just a little bit more put together, like just they have their life a little bit more figured out in terms of time management and attacking things like a professional. And it's funny the things you value in recruiting and in, certainly the evaluation process. And that's something that, that there's, I won't put him out there because I don't know if it's public, but there's at least one other transfer that Beamer did not put out there that he did not mention that I believe is also engaged as well. So that's something where South Carolina has had success with those guys and getting back to on the field. I think truly you want some other guys to start to emerge as well.
Well, and I think it's particularly interesting when talking about these guys out of the portal because you look at your two best players in Lenore Sellers and Dylan Stewart. Obviously, what they do on the field speaks for itself, but they're not the most vocal guys in the world. And maybe when they're away from cameras and microphones, they're a lot more vocal and a lot more comfortable around their teammates. But they don't say a whole lot, and they can certainly lead by their actions on the field. But in terms of those guys to give a riveting locker room speech, that may not be them. So maybe you're turning to some of these older, more experienced guys that are married and have better life experience and perspective and all that kind of stuff to fill in some of those gaps that maybe they can't do themselves.
Well, you think back last year, I mean, a couple of the guys we brought up, Kyle Kennard, while I don't know 100%, just from what we observed, what we heard, I don't think he was giving a riveting locker room speech. Demetrius Knight was, we know for a fact. I mean, he kind of ended up being the guy on Friday nights at the team hotel. He was going to get up and give the speech. Beamer's told the story multiple times where that just kind of happened organically, and they went, oh, whoa, okay. And he kind of became that guy for them. But Demetrius Knight was not just talking. He was out there making a ton of plays, too. Kyle Kennard's leadership was more, I'm going to go sack the quarterback, and make huge plays for this team. So you obviously need both of those. But I think, there's been so much talk about talent this offseason and the guys you lost and replacing that talent. Yes, that's critical. The most talented teams are the teams that win the most. But one of the reasons South Carolina was so good last year and was able to weather the bumps and the ebbs and flows of a season is they had those older guys. So in some ways, this team has youth at certain spots, but they also have experience. And that's why, in the transfer portal era, people are hyper-focused on stacking talent, which I just said you need.
Yep.
But the teams that can retain off their roster and then add in key pieces, I think those are the teams that are most poised for success.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And we've seen it work. Like I think going into last year, we saw the plan and we saw, they went out and got some big name guys, right? You got a Rocket Sanders. But we saw almost what is in some ways a value approach to recruiting in the transfer portal, still focusing on fit, focusing on experience, focusing on guys who have already been kind of physically developed in programs. And we saw it work. And, it was not quite the same approach because every cycle is different. Every year is different in terms of who is available and who is interested in your program. Maybe where some guys last year, it was a little bit more, this player has played a lot, but at a smaller school. This year was a little bit more like you take Gabe, who was at A&M and hadn't played a ton, but still, I think a focus on fit and a focus on being guys who are a little bit more developed just in their lives appears to be South Carolina's approach in the portal.
And we'll see how that leadership continues to evolve as we go through the offseason. Looping back to Friday night was a very important night from a recruiting standpoint. We'll highlight some of the guys that were in attendance and their thoughts on South Carolina coming up next as we wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Whether it's air conditioning, heating, maintenance, or indoor air quality products, the family team at Krantz Cooling, led by Justin Krantz, the general manager, has you covered. I love working with Krantz Cooling and Heating. I've had them out to my home, had them over at my mom's house once she moved here recently. They have been helping families and businesses, if you're a business owner, since 1983. So if you want to use a local company, a reliable company, a family-owned company to help with your home or business's HVAC needs, call the fine folks over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, 803-672-3224. Another great thing about them, they offer 0% APR for up to 60 months on qualifying equipment. Give them a call, again, 803-672-3224, or visit their website, krantzcooling.com. That's Krantz, cooling with a K, krantzcooling.com. Schedule an appointment. All your HVAC needs, Krantz Cooling.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Southwest Chris wrapping up today's edition of the show. Talked a lot about the spring game already, and we mentioned a little bit of this yesterday, but obviously a very good crowd, very good atmosphere there on Friday night, which goes a long way with recruiting, which Beamer has emphasized many times is a very important reason why you still have the spring game, and you guys have been writing about this on Gamecock Central in the days that have followed it, but a very strong showing from the guys, both in the 26, 27, 28 classes that did come out for the spring game on Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, tons of guys on campus, and, you know, it's kind of an interesting mix. 2026 priority guys, some 2026 guys that you're trying to make an additional move with, and then some young players, too, some of which are visiting for, you know, the first time or a second time, others that have been on campus a lot. So, I mean, I don't even know where you start here. Maybe a good place is, if we're talking about priorities for this class, how about Carter Meadows? You know, he's a guy that there was a story that came out from On3 not too long ago where it's like, hey, South Carolina's a major factor from this 6'6", 225-pound edge from Washington, D.C., who is the top player in D.C. and a top 35 prospect nationally on average. And you go, oh, okay. You know, Michigan, Ohio State, some other schools have been in the mix, and it looked like he's going to take an official visit to South Carolina. I still think that'll happen, but he was also on campus for the spring game. And while he was there, spent some time with Julian Walker, who's a big-time in-state defensive lineman whose father is on the strength and conditioning staff here in Columbia, plays at Dutch Fork. So, you know, every year Sterling Lucas is going to get the Gamecocks involved with some big-time guys. I mean, how about Dylan Stewart? I mean, that's the best example. Carter Meadows is not the only one in this cycle, but that's one that you point to that goes, you go, hey, there's big-time competition here, but you don't count out Sterling Lucas in a battle like this. He's now had him on campus, probably going to get him back for an official, and all indications are, Wes, it looks like they made a move for him. So, I mean, plenty of others to cover, but that might be a good starting point. It's Carter Meadows.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe the guy you circle at this point. You know, I thought maybe Rodney Dunham was going to be the guy we circled early on as being that kind of Sterling Lucas battle each cycle where he goes head to head with the big boys for a big time edge prospect. And now Meadows has kind of emerged as that person, I think. And so I think this was a big just happening, I guess, to get him in for a couple of days. And he came in with his family. And this was a trip that, had kind of been on the books from what I understand for a while. So it was kind of planned out. It was not just hey, yeah, let's check out South Carolina. It was a visit they really wanted to take. There's some high interest here. And, when you start talking about this being a class where you're looking at, I believe that combination of who can you put across from Dylan Stewart, but in the college football world where, if you're a star, you're going to play 3 years and you're going to head to the NFL. It's already time to start thinking about, all right, can you start replacing that spot as well? And so this is a kid way up there, 5-star guy, number 1 edge in the country according to some rankings, and just as someone, I think if you're South Carolina, you have now put yourself in the game with, and a guy that Gamecock fans need to remember that name, I think, at this point.
Well, in keeping with this recent cycle, or this current cycle, I should say, I'm looking at a piece we published on Gamecock Central, and one of the photos is Shane Beamer on the field with a few guys from the Rock Hill / Charlotte area. So you got Jazavian Currents, Wes, who's a big-time guy, already committed to the Gamecocks. But then a couple other targets. One from this class is Tamarian Watkins from Northwestern High, uncommitted, but has the Gamecocks in his top 5. Those guys hanging out during the game. And then you got another big-timer from the 2027 class who goes to Catawba Ridge, and Joshua Dobson, who we saw recently at the Under Armour camp in Charlotte, and is he's ranked as the number 2 corner in the country, and from what we saw, really looks like it. So you look at those 3 guys, you got one committed. If you could land the other 2, one this cycle, one next, that'd be a heck of a haul.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And when I start looking ahead to that next cycle in the state of South Carolina with Joshua Dobson, we saw him at the Under Armour camp in Charlotte, another kid that was getting back on campus for that spring game. It had been a while since he had visited. This is the next guy you need to be paying attention to if you're a South Carolina fan in terms of that class in the Palmetto State. And Chris, he's already like number 2 cornerback in the country. I saw a potential 5-star guy when we watched him running around up in Charlotte for that camp. So you can already see what Torian Gray has done in terms of recruiting guys in the secondary. Joshua Dobson may just be next up in the state.
Always important to stay on top of things with recruiting. Of course, Wes and Chris got plenty of good things on Gamecock Central about the latest going on with that and what happened over at the spring game on Friday night as well. I'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next is the halftime show. Myself and Terry Ford dive back into what happened with baseball last night, and also continue to look ahead to tomorrow night's NFL draft as well here on your Wednesday on The Game.
All right, it's lunchtime here on The Game. So if you're hungry like I am, you know where I'm going to recommend. It's Firehouse Subs, 15 different locations all around the Midlands. So if you're hanging out at the office, if you're driving around, if you're